listening to the Balancing Act podcast. Here's your hosts, Jamie Wonko and Joe Vitale.
Hey, buddy, guess what?
What?
We are officially recording according to the red light, as always. How are you? What's going on? This is Joe Vitale and Jamie Wonko. This is the Balancing Act podcast on human content. We are so happy that you are joining us once again. How are we doing, friend? What's going on?
I mean, I am a little bit upset because I ripped my shirt today at school.
Oh,
because,
man.
when you walk out of a bathroom stall in the fancy places where we work,
Yes.
it's just there's like raggedy, jaggedy edges. And I ripped my shirt. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to wear this shirt today because it's going in the garbage right after this.
Oh, I like that
It can't
shirt,
be
actually.
repaired. And, I thank you. And I really like wear, one of those where like, oh, this is a great fit. And
Yeah.
no, it ripped in like the little crochet. It's not fixable.
Oh,
Because
that's such
guys,
a
this
bummer.
girl can sew, right? So if
That's
I
so
could sew
basic.
it, I would
I know.
fix it, but it's unfixable.
I mean, you could just cut the sleeves off and just go, stay
That would be a look. Yeah.
sleeves.
It's the swan song for the shirt. But I think what's gonna pick me up is our guest today.
Yeah, of course he is. Well, let's
He's
bring
gonna
it.
make the day brighter.
Of course he is. Let's bring him in. Hello, Mitch Weathers. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
We
I'm
are
sorry to
Thanks so
hear
much.
about that,
Yeah.
but the fact that you sew is very impressive. Both of my daughters are knitters and crocheters and sewers, so
It's
You
a
know what's
terrific
art
thing
for
to
sure.
know how to do. Yeah.
You know what's really interesting? I have a number of Mitch. Both of us teach middle school, and I have a number of girls who've been doing like those. They're like, what are they called? Woobles or wobbles or something? Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
can order like a thing and they'll learn how to do it. Seems to be very relaxing. I think it actually would be something that I would like to do
Yeah,
because I
me too.
like because it's just like very repetitive and you do like the same
Mhm.
thing. But yeah, maybe I'll have to. And Jamie also famously did we have a thing at our school called Discovery Day where we teach kids like things that they wouldn't normally learn during the school day. And she did a class called That's So Basic where she was teaching kids how to like. What did you do?
The basics of sewing.
Yeah.
What the eye of a needle is and how to,
Yeah.
just foundational. But I went from sewing to now I'm going to make homemade dog biscuits. So you just never know
like
where Discovery Day is going to take you.
Listen, something different every time. It keeps us fresh, right?
It's true.
So Mitch organized my life. So
Be right over.
Yeah, so Mitch is the author of a book called The Executive Functions for Every Classroom, and also something called The Organized Binder, which you can find him on Instagram and all the socials and all that fun stuff. And we talk often about executive functions, study skills, what our students are lacking. So we're really excited to talk to you today. Hopefully you're going to fix everything. Amazing.
I'm here to fix it all.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping.
Lay it on me.
Yeah. So we'd love to hear about you and your journey and how, this whole thing came about with your foray into executive function.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I'm one of you. I'm a teacher. I taught, I should say. Spent most of my career as a 9th grade science teacher. And so just beyond you middle school teachers who are a breed of your own that I
Oh, true.
admire and respect. And when I started, I didn't have any of the language or it felt like something was missing. I'm based in California, Northern California. At the time, I was teaching in the Bay Area, and I spent most of my career at a large, comprehensive Title I public high school, and most of my students were multi-language learners. And I, in addition to my credential, have a master's degree in cross-cultural pedagogy.
Oh, wow.
So I'm supposed to be the guy that knew, like, hey, I know how to, come in and help here. And it just, no matter what I did, and I taught science, right? So it can be fun. We can go outside. We can blow things up. I could engage kids. You can have Bunsen burners in the classroom or whatever. And I really leaned in heavily as a teacher into student-teacher relationships. And so all of that felt good, but there was something missing. My students weren't progressing. They weren't experiencing any success, which was kind of their journey prior to that. And so I just tried to figure that out. I tried to answer a question like, what what has the greatest impact on student success? And if we can figure that out, let's do more of that stuff. And if we can't figure if it doesn't, then maybe let's do less of that. And I just kind of became somewhat obsessed with that. And it's a good thing I was a brand new teacher and very naive. Not that I had any expertise, but I just started throwing things out and was like, I don't understand how homework is related specifically, for example, to student success. And I'm not here to get into a homework debate. But at that time, I was like, well, then I'm just going to stop giving it and see what happens. And it was that kind of iterative process where I landed, now having the language, it was like, oh, something's missing. And what I first told my students is like, oh, you don't know how to do school. That's what it is. And I get it because I was never a very comfortable student in the classroom. It was not an easy space for me. I of course made it through, but I remember being in class and feeling like this thing's happening all around me and I don't really know how to jump in with any agency or dexterity. But a lot of you seem like you do. And you know how to do school and I don't. And why is that? And so that all of that kind of swirled together, looking at my kiddos early on and just saying, oh, like, I know exactly what you're feeling. You want to be successful, but you just don't, something's missing here. And that's where these executive functioning skills, come in, where when students get a chance to practice them over time while seeing them modeled within the context or in conjunction with what they're learning, the grade level or subject, things start to change pretty powerfully. So,
I mean,
I love how you approached the problem like a real science teacher. It was, right? It was like, I'm
Well,
going to use the scientific method on this thing. I'm going
Yeah.
to form my hypothesis, right? And you went through to see, and that's excellent that you saw a problem and you are now able to help kids. Joe, were you going to
Yeah.
say something?
Yeah, there are two things that you mentioned. You mentioned about cross-cultural education, cross-cultural, what your master's was in again? I'm sorry.
pedagogy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Cross-cultural.
interested in hearing about that, to be very honest. Like what does that look like?
Yeah.
Because Jamie and I are in a school with a large amount of English language learners. So I mean, I've never heard of that
Yeah.
before, that there's an actual master's in that particular area.
Right. It's been so long, Joseph. I don't even know if I could remember everything I learned, but I can tell you what I did take away from it was some of the fact that, my first day in the classroom, and I should back up a little bit. I started after undergrad. I was an ED of a nonprofit that worked with at-risk middle school and high school age kids. So I wanted to work with kids and back to that relationship piece. So when I got into the classroom, and I've learned this now for all the years I've been in this and have been mentor teacher for new teachers and whatnot, especially at the high school level, it can take a year, 2 or 3 to just learn how to interface with this alien species.
Yeah.
It's 15-year-old in your class, right? And I came in and it was like, this is my wheelhouse. Like I can do that part of it because I've had all this experience with it. And I think it afforded me the opportunity or kind of maybe some of the bandwidth to noodle on well, why aren't you guys being successful? But to back up and that graduate work did was it introduced me to Paulo Freire's work. And that was a whole other journey of mine. Just radically transformed me as a human and as a teacher. And he's definitely the one that this idea of, we need to take students from being passive objects to active subjects in the classroom. How do you transform that? But a lot of it too was just like, oh, I get it. This system was built for people that look like me and have a lived experience like mine. And it's not working well for all of the students in my classroom. And now what can I do about that? So there was an equity piece there, but some of the pedagogical things that hit me early on, and one I'll just sticks out because it also lends itself to organized binder in this program that evolved out of my practice was I realized wow, I'm relying on verbal communication far too much. And back to that equity piece, if you're sitting in a classroom and English is not your primary language, therefore everything you're reading, everything you're hearing, you're having to translate, and you're spending a significant amount of your mental calories, aka your working memory, just trying to keep up. And if you're sitting next to a student for whom English is their primary language, they're not using any of their mental calories there, and they can take that and focus on what they're learning. So
Mm.
I had to figure out, like, okay, how do I rely on nonverbal communication, right, to
Mm.
make the hidden curriculum explicit. And organized binder is all about establishing a predictable routine. The reason it's a physical binder, so you can see it, is modeling as part of that, but it's all color coded. And so where we are in this routine, each step of the routine is a different color in the binder. And so basically, I tried to communicate my expectations and use no words. And all of a sudden, things started changing. Like, oh, I see that their capacity is opening up. And then, really, the kind of, if I boiled it all down, the thesis of my work is that the executive functions are just a byproduct of participating in the routine.
Yeah.
So each step of the routine, I get practice with a different skill: time management, organization, goal setting. But it's just as a byproduct of this routine, like, oh, the first step, we're going to flex our working memory through retrieval practice, AKA we're going to review what we did last time, and I'm going to be able to answer any questions, give you multiple exposures to what you're trying to learn. Next step, we take out our calendars, and so it's learning by doing within the context. But all that nonverbal mixed up in there, that I think that
Yeah.
came from the master's degree. So I hope
Yeah.
that.
No, absolutely. And the second thing you mentioned was about, we have a similar stance in regards to homework. It needs to be purposeful. Okay. But also, like, was there any pushback for you when you decided, like, you know what, I'm not going to give any homework? Or, whether from your colleagues or administration or even from the kids, like from certain kids that were like, oh, phew, this is like a load off my back. Like,
Definitely that.
Yeah.
You're the cool teacher if you don't give homework. And it didn't stick for a long time. I mean, my homework, I've thought a lot about the homework question. And what bothered me, because I also, that first year or two, I called it the student with itness study, because I was really curious, because here I am literally just trying stuff, right? Jamie, like you said, like this iterative scientific method process. And therefore, things were changing. Like, I think I went through like 5 different iterations of an organizational system. And literally, I'd come in after like 6, 8 weeks, like a quarter, and be like, take everything and put it in the recycle bin. We're trying this now. That is not working. And so, with all of this change, there were certain students that no matter what I threw at them, they were successful. And and it was very diverse. It wasn't one, demographic or cohort of students. And I just was fascinated by that. And I decided maybe I had a lot of time on my hands. I can't imagine doing this as a full-time teacher, but I invited families to this study, and I interviewed students. They opted in. They wrote this piece for me, and then I went and had dinner at their home
oh, wow.
and recorded a conversation, just me and the family. And sometimes I'd have to bring a colleague because it was a Spanish-speaking home. Sometimes it wasn't. And it was fascinating, of course, completely eye-opening. But no matter what I did, there were certain students that could just be successful. And in that, I bring that up because what I learned when I went to all these different homes in different environments, I'm like, if I'm relying on homework to guide my instruction, like to understand what students are learning, to know where they are, like, am I using homework as a formative assessment? Because if I am, it's completely inequitable, because everybody's lived experience outside of school is different. And it's entirely, or shouldn't say entirely, it may be unreliable because it's outside of my sphere of influence. Like, do you have a tutor? Did you get help? Did you copy it? I have no idea. So there's all these variables I can't control. And so I take this thing, spend my time, grade it, leave feedback, give it back to the kids. Do they even look at the feedback? I don't know. And
No.
exactly. So those were my things with homework. So I just started saying, hey, homework quickly became one thing: the opportunity to interact with the things we're learning again. I don't care if you're right. I don't care if you're wrong. It's, learning when we move things to the long-term memory, which is the ultimate goal of everything we're teaching, it's all about multiple exposures, which cause us to retrieve that which we're learning. So if I can just give you more opportunities to interact in a no stakes way, it's more likely that you are to learn it. So I just kind of took the pressure off of it
Hmm.
and used it in that way,
That's
which
awesome.
made me the cool teacher, right? Because homework was not the thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've all had different shared experiences, right? In regards to homework. I know what changed and I mean, I don't want to get off topic, of course, but um, I witnessed my own kids come home and in elementary school, like I'm trying to explain them how to do the math and I'm not explaining how their teacher explained it. And then it becomes frustration and tears. And now my son is in pre-calc. And I told him when he started this semester, I was like, hey, buddy, if you need help in pre-calculus, go with God, my friend, because I do
Khan
not have,
Academy.
yeah, I am not, there's no way I can help you. But I also think about kids that have algebra, pre-algebra, whose parents can't help them.
Right.
Who's, the kid who is a ELL student who goes home to a parent that,
Yeah.
can't help them with the language translation. They got to learn that stuff on their own. So I've changed my stance on a lot of things. I know Jamie feels very
I used to
similar.
write on my children's paper whether I could help them or not. They could not do this, period. I
Hmm.
felt it was very important for the teacher to
Yeah.
know, just because I'm a
Oh,
teacher,
your own
my
personal
my
children
own
back to
children,
you. Oh, I
yes, I
see.
would send it back and I would say, as much as I want to help you, homework is supposed to be something that you have learned how to do this. This is a skill that you should be able to complete on your own. And if you can't do it, just because I happen to be a teacher doesn't mean that at home I'm supposed to be sitting with you and reteaching something you should have learned in school. And
Yeah.
I felt like I was doing a disservice to my kids if I was doing that, because it just never clicked with me. And I have a lot of feelings about homework and what should or should not be done. And I think a lot of it is a time waste, genuinely, for especially because my own children have so many unique interests, and they do very well in school, but would much prefer to do like to be able to explore their own interests. And sometimes I have one that will say to me, like, I don't have any time to even think about my art because she's on her eighth of the same. It's like, Sheridan knows how to do it. I know you know
Yeah.
how to do it. Why it's not.
Repetitive.
Yeah, it's repetitive and
Mhm.
unnecessary, and, so I would say it's changed for me a bit as a parent. Across the board, to me, it's you should always be having some sort of interesting, uh, journey to something that I think we used to call it like a walkabout, right? So, what are you designing for yourself that you are developing your own interests rather than doing 57 math problems or, whatever else it might be. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And I'm not, for the kid that needs the extra help and the extra work. And I always use the example of like, look, when I wanted to get a B in algebra in high school, I had to have a tutor. I had to ask for extra problems. There was no Khan Academy or online programs at the time.
right.
Like I had to figure all that stuff out on my own because if I wanted to get the good grade, I had to put in the extra work.
But we've talked
Which
about too that with tutors and things like that, it's not an equitable situation because,
no.
and I've hired tutors for my own children, and
Mhm.
that's also not fair because there's lots of people who I'm sure would absolutely do that if they could financially do it for their children, and they
100%.
cannot. So
Which
yeah,
which leads me to, the whole reason why we're talking to you today, part of the reason anyway, is I work for a company outside of teaching called Educational Connections, and I do executive function tutoring myself. And it is like day after day after day that we get, hey, kids are looking for coaches, kids are looking for new we get anywhere from, let's say, late elementary through college. We get kids that are like, I'm amazed by getting college students that need help with planning and organization of figuring out their schedules. That amazes me because to me, I'm like, well, how do you get to that point, not already being able to do these things? And then I think to myself, well, it's probably the parent that is doing all those things for them. So I'm so interested in also,
Lucky. Yeah.
yeah, if they're that, I'm glad you just said that, Mitch. If they're lucky, right? Because some
Mhm.
parents don't have the capability to be able to do that.
Yeah, and
Um,
many teachers struggle with executive dysfunction, which
yeah.
complicates the environment for students
Yeah.
even more.
Well,
So,
and that's the second problem is all the kids that I deal with, and we talked about this on a previous episode. Um, even the routines are not all the same routine. Like everything gets posted in Google Classroom differently. This teacher writes this thing on the board over here. This one does it on Google Classroom. This one posts it on, a smoke signal, like whatever it is. Like everybody's using something different, and it becomes very difficult for the kid to weed through all of that and figure out, well, what is it exactly that I'm supposed to be doing? What needs to get the most important part of my effort? Um, so I'm curious as to how teachers like myself and Jamie could implement a program such as yours in our classroom,
yeah,
which is going to make it effective and helpful for those kids in other classes.
right. And you speak truth, of course. And yeah, not only do students struggle with like that ambiguity that all of the differences bring, because there's already enough difference in middle school. One, I've made the transition from a self-contained experience
Yeah.
my whole academic career now, which is scary. And now I'm with big kids. You might have lockers. I have I was speaking at a district that I won't mention. It was a district wide symposium, and we were at a middle school, like you guys, and it was in this big auditorium that the middle school had. And I was making my way to the place where I was going to give a talk, and I noticed their bell schedule on the wall, and they have 10 class periods a day plus lunch. And I was like, about like fell out of my chair. Like, what? How is that even possible? And you start to think of this through like the lens of cognitive load, which is what you're referring to, Joseph. Like, okay, so what am I supposed to, how do I do this one? Like, this one's a smoke signal. This one sends something home on paper. This one sends it in Google Classroom. And I'm trying to figure all of that out. Right. And if we can reduce that cognitive load through collective efficacy, like what can we rally around collectively that reduces some of that? I'm not using my mental calories just navigating the school day or the school year. True for parents too. We've all had that experience with if you have children
Yeah.
where you are trying to help them with their homework. And it's like, well, because there's no organizational structure in this class. Where are your notes for math? Like,
Yeah.
because I don't want to say it the way I want to do it the way your teacher is
Yeah.
doing math, and all of that complicates it. But
And not to
no,
interrupt.
go ahead.
Sorry, Mitch, but we haven't talked about it. We were going to talk about another episode, but even like Kelly Clarkson recently made a comment on like, my kids and they have like these things during the day and like I missed it and I didn't see the announcement and they had a choir rehearsal or choir recital and I wasn't there. So like I was the bad parent and had to tell them that I wasn't there. Like, she's got an assistant. She's got other people in her life that are helping organize her schedule and she missed something important, right?
All right. And
And
it's
not that it's a look. I feel the same way. Like, oh, we're doing this during the school day, so then you got to like get out of work and go do stuff. But that's the way it is. That's the way life is. Um,
yeah, just the more so if I could break it down, like you're saying, like what could you do in the classroom? And in my book, I explain that one, executive functioning skills are not taught in the traditional like sense of the word. I believe that they're best learned when students get one, when students clearly see them modeled and they get practice employing them by virtue of engaging in a predictable daily routine. So every day I see the table of contents that is what mine's supposed to look like. And I'm updating my table of contents while the teacher's doing it. And it's all the stuff the teacher's already doing. So this is no extra work for the classroom teacher.
Right.
This is already the content, the curriculum and stuff you're teaching. But I'm not going to hand you a portfolio and say, like, now you're magically organized because of this tool I gave you, right?
yep.
It's every day through repetition, not through teaching, because teachers don't have enough time to teach the stuff we're tasked with teaching in the first place. So even if I wanted to teach executive functions, um, realistically, it's not going to fit. And which is why this work is not a curriculum. And so the three keys to, and I know I said they're not taught, but the three keys to teaching executive functions are clarity, modeling, and routine. And when we look at the research, what has this one consistently one of the most significant impacts on student success is collective teacher efficacy when we're all in this thing together. And one of the conundrums I propose, if I'm ever giving a keynote or a talk or something, is saying, what can we be collective about? Because by definition, we're so siloed. Think of that middle school where I was visiting. You have this student who, and it's a 6, 7, 8. In 5th grade, I'm with this teacher. It gets to know me, hopefully my family loves on me, and I just have this experience. Now I'm going to 10 different classes, 10 different places, 10 different subjects, 10 different teachers, 10 different cohorts of students in every class. Like the amount of cognitive load, right? And now I'm translating everything I'm hearing and reading. I mean, it's just overwhelming when you start to think about it. So if we follow the research, collective teacher efficacy has a significant impact. Well, how do we get collective when by definition we're siloed, right? You teach math, you teach ELA, I'm 7th grade, you're 8th grade, you're 6th grade, I'm science. Well, we can get collective around clarity, modeling, and routine. And all that means is I clearly model. I have a class sample binder. My class sample looks exactly like you, my students, your binder should look. I'm speaking organized binder now. And we implement a very simple but clear and predictable daily routine, and we never stray from it. We can all do that. And it because it is content agnostic work and not a curriculum, we're just talking about how we start, how we transition, where do we put our stuff, how do we conclude. It's all wrapped up in a lesson. So if that how we do school, I don't have to think about anymore. I just show up and I know the expectation because it's clearly modeled and we do it every day. And with all of that, the byproduct is you're practicing these specific executive functioning skills that research has shown move the needle for students. So it's I don't want to say easy, but it is quite easy to get collective around this work. And it's you can feel it on campus when the staff gets serious about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. We have a 6-period schedule for different from what we had block scheduling for 4 blocks a day. Now we have 6 1-hour periods a day. And this year so normally we have like one day we have 2-hour preps, like 1 hour, 1 hour. And then the opposite day we have a 1-hour prep, and we also have a like some sort of a duty. So it's great for the teachers. What I've noticed and realized this year, I agreed to pick up a 5th class. So I teach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I only have a prep every other day. And my duty is like hall monitor, so I have to walk around. And every other day that I'm doing my walking duty, I can see into the classrooms, specifically of my 8th graders. I teach 4 8th grade classes, and I'm just walking, and I think to myself, I can't believe you guys have to have another class. Because I am
That's a good perspective.
I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I am so," and we know they don't have recess. We know, some of them don't have gym class. They would have a health class. So this is now the 6th. I'm like, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see like a lot of them like leaning back in the who
Oh,
has Spanish or whatever it
a-
might be, and
yeah.
they are wiped out. And
Mhm.
honestly, I cannot blame them because I could
Cool.
not do another class.
And then we got the bright idea of and I don't mean to knock anybody that made this decision because it's probably a top down thing and it comes from the state. It was we're going to implement this special social emotional component in our lessons, and we're going to have the kids do it during gym. So whatever it is, once every 2 weeks or twice a month, they're going to sit on the floor of the gym with their workbook and do an SEL lesson. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like the only time that they could run around and blow off some steam and release some energy, let's have them sit again and fill out a book. Not to mention like all the things that you're mentioning about clarity and modeling and routine, which I absolutely love. We're also not mentioning like for the middle school kid, the biological component, right? They're all scrambled eggs. Their hormones are out of balance. Their brains are still developing. There's a reason why they need these things. And it's also partially biological because it helps them to learn, what is the pathway that I should be on in regards to completing things. If they can remove, I love that you're using the word, cognitive load, but you also used something with calories. Now it popped out of my head.
Mental calories.
Yeah, the mental
I like
calories.
to refer to it as mental calories.
Yeah, like I'm dead serious. Like there's some days where I get home and I'm like, I don't like decision fatigue, right? I've made too many decisions. What are we gonna have for dinner? I don't know. I'll cook it. Somebody just tell me. I don't want to make any more decisions.
I have a question about the binder. Is there so it's a physical binder, right? That you're and so would that look different depending on the school? Is it one giant binder that the kids have like tabs for different subjects, or is it different for each class?
Yeah, so you'd have a portfolio or a binder for each class, each subject.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is once students learn to get and stay organized, and that second part, I always make sure I say, because that's the point of these skills, that you only learn through repetition over time. But once they do, and it becomes a transferable competency, like it's mine, they don't lose things anymore. They're not stuffing things in the book bag. They're not, and so that binder fills up. And one of the other byproducts of this routine is students create a year-long portfolio, an evidence binder of their effort in learning, which we need to make this really clear here. We're not talking about grades. We're not talking about content. We're not talking about testing right. This is a byproduct of routine. So I can be struggling with the content of a certain subject. We'll keep it in the middle school space for you, where you're at. I may be struggling with this particular subject or maybe some part of that subject, whatever it might be, but I can still get practice with executive functioning skills and create a year-long portfolio of my evidence and my learning, my effort. And let's say I earned a C in the class. Or too often in the modern classroom, in my opinion, success is tied entirely to my grade, like how I'm doing academically. And so if I'm struggling with that, what content and what I'm trying to learn, I may be less likely to engage because I don't feel successful, right? But if I can switch that, and that was a big aha moment for me in my classroom, is students now started having the opportunity for success within an academic context that wasn't tied to content. So I could, and I talk about this in the book, I call it, you get celebrate victories. You have to acknowledge. So I could walk around to a student who was struggling, and I knew was struggling, and be like, hey, way to go. You got your right, like you're just identify things that were part of the routine. And who doesn't like to feel good about that? And the other thing, well, we can maybe this be too deep a dive, but the more opportunities I can be successful within that context, the more likely I am to take risks that are inherent to learning. And we can't forget that inherent to learning is failure, right? So if I don't feel safe, then I'm going to I'm going to be less likely to take those risks. That's just human nature, which is the subtitle of my book, is Creating Safe and Predictable Learning Environments. The more predictable, the safer, especially for kids whose lives outside of school are anything but predictable and might skew towards chaotic. When I can find myself in a consistently predictable space with a teacher who's hopefully smiling and loving on me, it has a significant impact on my engagement, which then translates into learning. So, but yes, it's one by all that. Sorry.
No, yeah, no, that's great. No, do you have one, or do you have any like pushback or any opposition because so many people teach in digital spaces or using so much?
That's odd. I've never been asked that. I'm kidding. Every time.
I was about to be like,
every time. The whole thing, if I had a dime for every time someone has said, hey, when is Organized Binder going to be an app? Oh. And I immediately reply, never.
Yeah.
Because apps do things for us and they're wonderful. Take GPS, right? I don't need a Thompson's guide anymore. if you're old enough to know what that thing was, or a map in my car. This is a safer. It's amazing, but if you can't, you know, this is true of an app or teachers doing it for you. Like, I've put everything on the calendar for you for the whole week. You should know. It's like the only way to learn to manage in my times, I have to be involved in that. I have to have practice with that. So the digital piece often comes up. Now, with that said, we have an educator dashboard, and the entire program exists digitally, of course. Our goal setting template, our table of content, and a lot of teachers are accessing that just for projecting in class, that modeling piece. But others, you can use that in a digital application, but it's still there's a great saying. So we work with some schools in Hawaii, and I travel quite a bit, and I have the honor of being on all these different campuses, and yes, I do the hard work of traveling to Hawaii and supporting schools. But when I'm there,
someone has to do it, Mitch.
Somebody has to do it. But I've had multiple people tell me on different islands, different schools, and say, "Hey, it's interesting." After a talk, they'll say, this whole idea of these skills not being taught, they're best learned. But when I get practice with them, and there's a native Hawaiian expression called makahana kaike, and I've had multiple people totally different, not really knowing each other, tell me, this really sums up your work, makahana kaike. And I go, what's that mean? And they said, well, it's a native Hawaiian expression that the knowing is in the doing, that there's certain things we learn by doing them. We have to get messy with them. We have to fail. We have to do it over and over and over. And I really believe that sums up this work with executive functioning skills, which, to be honest, are being referenced as future skills now, because if it's true that the jobs of the future, many of them don't even exist. And now with the AI revolution, what's all this mean 5-10 years from now? Well, then what should we really be teaching our students if what we're preparing them for doesn't even exist yet? We can't.
I know.
Right? It's these transferable competencies. It's these executive functioning skills, future skills, that if I get enough practice with them, I make them my own, then when I find myself in that new environment, whatever it might be, then I'm more likely to be successful because I can put them into action. But historically, we've left it up to chance. And I have evidence for this. Everywhere I go, I ask teachers, it could be a room of 30, it could be a room of 300, and I'll pick any of these skills. I'll do time and planning and time management, time blocking and whatnot. And I'll ask people, hey, when you were a young person, did a caring adult give you a calendar or a planner of some sort and show you how to use it, and then walk with you for a while to hold you accountable, really, and to make sure you're using it over time? And you might have 1 or 2 or 3 hands go up. Or organizationally, did anyone ever show you and then walk this with you every day? And we've kind of just hoped that these happen. We pick them up as we move through life. And then that gets back to an equity issue. Well, based on my lived experience, I maybe have had some exposure. I may have seen them modeled at home. Maybe I haven't. So interesting conversation.
That's always my first step. When I'm working with executive function kids, or I start out the school year the last couple of years, as I've done, I've suggested to parents, getting a planner and a paper planner to be able to write down assignments, because there's a connection between writing things down and remembering to do them, and using that as a communication tool between myself and the family. I've also, Jamie had a great suggestion, and this is a great suggestion for any teacher, to open those lines of communication back home, is through your grading program, through your learning management system. There's probably some place where you could hit a button, check a box, and it's going to email everybody in your class. And I send weekly emails saying, hey, here's what we're working on. Here's some of the things maybe behaviorally that I'm seeing, or here's a flyer for Spirit Week, or just as a reminder, we have a test coming up, remind your children to write down in their planner. I always make sure to mention that, to continue that conversation at home. And I Jamie had mentioned that. I said, why am I not doing that? And I just started doing it. It doesn't take long to write an email. So, it's definitely a tool that I have students start with. I just give them a couple examples off Amazon and say, hey, you don't need to have the one that I'm endorsing. I don't care what one you have, as long as you have one that's going to work for you.
Mhm.
Um,
I do want to say, and I think that there is like sometimes an idea of, like, oh, executive functioning. And is this a new thing? Or, what did our parents do? And it's something, it's just like me as a mom. I'm going to I'm going to make my little mom speech. But when my sister and I, between us, have 7 children, and we often talk about our mom in the 80s and how she just, kicked it. And a lot of parents were, our mom was home and it was great. Right. But she had one folder, right? So we had one folder
oh yeah.
and the paper came home in the folder. There was no remind, there was no email, it was streamlined and simplified in a way that was incredibly manageable. And so I think we do have a generation of parents like me who were not, raised by people who had to manage 1,000 things. And so everyone is genuinely trying to do their best. But when we talk about like trying to teach our kids, we're all trying to sort of keep our heads afloat in many situations as well. So I think that it can translate for adults to the children and back again, because there are so many things that we're all expected to keep up with that it's an unrealistic expectation, I think. And we think, oh well, the kids could. It's like a lot of adults can't do it
Yeah.
because it is a more recent. I mean, even just email, right? And how many, like my son's in band, and then I have the app for band. Then I get an email, and who's at theater school, and then they get an either. Right?
Mhm.
And so it is this generational thing that is, so important for all of us to look into and to teach the kids, because I think it's something that a lot of us struggle with ourselves as adults. Like you said earlier,
Right,
not just teachers.
right, right, and it's that folder was clarity.
Yeah.
It was very clear where this communication
That's right.
comes in. It brings up a few things, right? Like one, I mean, teachers, we have our best intentions in mind when we send emails, but not all parents read email,
Right.
right? And we have too many modes of communication. Pick one, even if it is email. But
Mhm.
I could text you. I could send a message from my grading platform. I could send it from student information system. I could email. I mean, there's too much, I
Yes.
think, for parents at times. But speaking of the parent piece, this is where, and Joseph, you'd mentioned this earlier. Like, I may not, depending on the subject I'm teaching, be able to rely on content support at home.
Yeah.
And for me, there was that was very true being a science teacher at the high school level. And oftentimes, many of my students' parents were working in the evenings. And, if you were the older sibling, you took care of the younger siblings. And there was a lot there. But what I found was executive functions, it's a way to engage. It's a really unique but compelling way to engage families, because find me a parent that doesn't celebrate the teacher who's trying to develop the child as a whole person, a whole learner, and not just my math content or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so for us, and I can send you both a digital copy if you want to check it out, but it's a bilingual guide for families. It's a flip book that reads Spanish or English for US anyway. It's some other languages digital, but in our student bundle, that organized binder, which is everything the kid needs for the whole school year, one of those it's a gift for the family, and it goes home and it explains what executive functions are. It explains the routine. You see all this all color coded and everything. And I realized, here's where I realized it. My oldest daughter's a freshman in high school, and I went to back to school night for the first time as a parent and not a teacher
Hmm.
or a consultant or being on a campus or something. I didn't realize what a difference it was going to be. But I walked around and kind of what we're all talking about here. Every class was different. Everyone was, but it was all about the content and the lack of clarity. I was like, oh my gosh, I
Hmm.
see it now. Where I would do back to school night, and I have parents come up afterwards and be like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this binder. And I love that I can see my kids' reflections and where their work is and their goals. And because it was that clarity piece. So if you can figure out a way to invite parents into this, because what I've also seen, and Joseph, I'd be really curious to get your take on this as a executive function coach. Executive functioning work done at home can turn into a battle of wills between the parents and the kid. And I can say it this way, like I come home from school, Jamie, your point of like 6 classes, I'm completely exhausted. Just as a human being, I think all those kids need to be outside if possible for a couple hours running, not on a screen.
Hell yeah.
Go be a kid. But
Yeah.
I digress. You come home, you're exhausted, and your mom sits down and says, okay, let's look at your goals that you set and let's talk about those. Can you take out your table of contents? Let's get ourselves organized. The kid's like, no, I don't want to do this. But if that is just a support, where I can say, hey, here's your table of contents. We're updating it every day together in class, which takes about a minute or two. And if you just check in with your kid on occasion or every day, then you can hold them accountable. And it's these quicker checks, and doing your homework and all that, if you have homework, will be easier, as opposed to trying to do it at home and then bring it to school can be difficult. So there's a really interesting, I write about it in the book too, like the opportunity to engage families in a way that is not tied to content, and they love it. So.
Yeah. And I have experienced that with pretty much every kid that I've worked with, that there's a little bit of pushback initially of like, well, do I really need this? Like, I'm handing all my work in. It's like, no, well, for your parent, it doesn't work. So like, but I'm also not a magic bullet. There's 187 hours in a week. I have you for 90 minutes, 2 hours. Like, there are things that you have to put in place. Like, let's put in place a system. And just like you were talking about, like you used to come in and keep scrapping stuff. Like, we're going to try something different. Like, I tell the kids that too, the kids that I work with. Like, if we try something and it doesn't work, we'll just try something else. But the parent needs to also hear that too. There's going to be some adjustment period for the kid to finally buy into what that system is. And I like the idea of clarity, modeling, and routine. Like, it needs to be a routine thing. Come home, check the planner real quick. Here's what your assignments are. Okay, hop to it. It's on the kid. And again, I'm teaching the middle school, and I'm also, I'm also dealing with kids whose parents are very, very supportive and have the time and ability to do that. So not every kid has that at home.
You bring up that accountability piece. I really fundamentally believe we cannot even start talking about holding students accountable until that clarity piece is there. Like, this is I'm going to model for you what it looks like to be organized. And when I do that routinely every day, then I can, and only then, start to hold you accountable. Hey, why aren't you? This is the third step of the routine. We update the table of contents every day. Anything we're going to create or you're going to get, it just gets indexed here. Why aren't you doing that? Now, that could be a red flag, and that's why this work is meant to be tier 1 as opposed to a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, like all kids getting practice. But if an issue or a concern is persistent, then it can be a more authentic tier 2 intervention, right? Is it just you're being lazy and blowing it off? Or is there something going on here that we need to kind of through the UDL lens? Maybe this needs to look a little different for you.
Yeah.
Okay. But until you have that clarity in that routine and you're modeling it for students, I've seen it where it's like, I gave you your planner and it's almost like a punitive thing. Why aren't you using it? Why isn't it? Well, I don't know how to really do that yet.
Yeah.
So just as a point around accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitch, I can't thank you enough for being willing to join us today.
My pleasure.
And talk to us about something that we're both passionate about, but I know that a lot of our listeners are too. I'll hold you to it. I'm hoping that you're going to fix everything.
I mean, if you need anybody to carry your binders to Hawaii, Mitch, let me know.
Yes, I have said on a previous episode, one day you may not see me for a while, and I'll just have sold all my stuff to be an Uber driver in Oahu. Because I was there this past summer, and it's amazing. But good for you. Tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to.
Yeah. So, Mitch, I appreciate you. Jamie, I appreciate you. Friend, thanks for being with us.
Mitch. Yeah. We appreciate you so much for joining us today on the Balancing Act podcast. Everybody check out Mitch's book entitled Executive Functions for Every Classroom. And also follow him at Organized Binder.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Mitch. We'll see everybody next time on the Balancing Act podcast.
Thanks.
Look for the Balancing Act podcast every week on your favorite podcast platform. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Thank you for being a part of our audience. We appreciate you.